you ever wondered what America was like 100 years ago?
Or how peanut butter was invented?
Why is the sky blue?
Tired of the same boring history book?
Let's discover something new today.
Welcome to Kids on the Square.
This episode of Kids on the Square is called Summer Stories. That's right, folks. As this summer nears its end and the next school year approaches, we wanted to bring in more members of the Public Square and American Policy Roundtable team to tell us stories about what summer was like when they were kids, in a time with fewer screens and little to no internet. Today you'll hear stories about camping trips, backyard adventures, working on a farm, and even some extreme sports. Some of these voices you may recognize from past episodes of Kids on the Square, and some may be new to you. Let's start with a voice that's new to Kids on the Square, but one that you'll certainly recognize if you're a regular listener of the Public Square. Co-host Wayne Shepard. Thanks for being here, Wayne. You have a camping story that you'd like to share?
Well, the best thing about summer when I was growing up was going camping. I lived in Michigan, so several times each summer we would load up the car with a tent and the sleeping bags and the lantern, plus a whole lot of other stuff that we would need to spend a week at the lake. And my favorite spot was called Loon Lake. Now, I didn't have any brothers or sisters close to my age that I could play with, but I did have cousins, and our families would go camping together so us kids could have fun swimming and exploring the woods around the lake and doing all kinds of kid stuff. The best part was building a campfire, roasting hot dogs and marshmallows. I remember our first camping trip when I was only maybe about 4 years old. At that time, we didn't even have a tent to sleep in. We had a car. It was called a Nash. It was a pretty funny looking car because if you could have turned it upside down, it would have looked like a bathtub. But the thing about this car is that when you parked it in a campground, you could fold down all the seats and make a bed right there in the car. So my parents and I would pull into the campground, lower all the seats into a bed, put some towels up as curtains, and the three of us would sleep right there in the car. Well, you know the button on the steering wheel that honks the horn? Yeah, my mom was sleeping on that side of the car, and late one night after the whole campground had gone to bed, my mom kicked in her sleep and got her foot stuck on that horn. The noise woke up the whole campground, and we got a lot of unhappy stares from people the next day. I don't think anybody appreciated losing sleep all because of that horn. But now every time I hear a car horn honk at me, I smile. And I remember camping in that old bathtub Nash.
That's a great story. Thank you, Wayne. And listeners, I bet you'll want to do what I did after listening to this story. Look up the old Nash cars, the Rambler, the Statesman, the Ambassador. These are some beautiful old cars, and I bet camping in them would have been a blast. Telling our next summer story, we've got Anna Welch, APR's creative director and co-author of The Front Steps. If you haven't heard our Book Nook interview with Anna and her co-author, Alan C. Duncan, talking about The Front Steps, you'll want to give that a listen after this episode. Anna, you wanted to tell us about the pond in your backyard?
So we were outside most all of our days during summer, and we had a pond in the back of our yard. It was owned by another house, but we had access to this pond. So all the kids in the neighborhood had lots of fun adventures involving this pond. In the wintertime, we would skate on it, which was really fun. And the owners of the pond were hunters, so they would always test the ice and make sure it was safe. But we'd skate on it. When we first moved in, my mom was having the boys do relay races across the pond. I wasn't a really strong swimmer, so I wasn't quite there yet. But we soon discovered there was a snapping turtle in this pond, so we pretty much as a neighborhood got the snapping turtle out and put it in a big garbage can, and the adults took care of it from there, and it was deemed safe again. But one day the girls in the neighborhood were doing a lemonade stand, and the boys were out frog hunting in the back of this pond, and they caught all sorts of stuff. Like, I fished in the pond, we would catch tadpoles, look for snails, all sorts of stuff like that. So the boys were looking for bullfrogs, and the girls of the neighborhood were out by the street selling lemonade. And the boys come over to the girls' lemonade stand. I think they had a little bit of a tiff on their shoulder because they weren't making any money that day. So they said to the girls, we got this frog. They caught a frog, and we'll give you $1 if any of you girls will touch this frog. So none of the girls would do it. They were like, gross. Okay. So I'm not one to shy away from a challenge, especially if it's my older brother giving me a challenge. So I held the frog. I got $1 from him, which was like always a good day when I could keep up with my older brother. And then the story goes is eventually they got sick of, asking the girls to touch the frog. So we kept it as part of our lemonade stand. And if anybody would hold, any adult, any kid would hold the frog at the lemonade stand, they would get a free glass of lemonade.
I would definitely hold the frog for the free lemonade. Probably not the snapping turtle, but I'd hold the frog. Listeners, would you hold the frog? Discuss amongst yourselves. Anna, thank you so much for sharing. Up next, our administrative associate, Sherry Eisen, is joining us. If you've listened to our Book Nook episodes, you'll know that Sherry is the author of The Upside Down Forest. And if you haven't listened to that interview, just go ahead, pop it in the queue right after that Front Steps episode. Sherry, you also had a frog-related story for us?
So when I was a kid, there was a lot of freedom. We could just go and roam. Behind my property, there was an airport and a runway strip, so it was all open land. And my grandfather parked his plane back there, and we grew up just thinking people had planes in their backyard. But I had lots of freedom and adventure. There was also a farm that connected to it, and so not a lot of kids in the area. So my best friend that would travel with me all the time was my Great Dane boxer mix, whose name was Max. And Max and I would go out on long, all-day adventures, and we were completely safe. And one summer was particularly dry, and so we were familiar with streams and nooks and valleys and trees and all kinds of places where we knew every inch of it as well as we did our own home. But one summer was particularly dry, and there was a pond where we knew there were lots of tadpoles, and it was beginning to shrink down. And at my young age, I was very concerned that the tadpoles weren't going to live and become those frogs that we loved to listen to at the night. So we trekked back to the house. We got buckets. I got a bucket. He walked along beside me, and I scooped out all of the tadpoles and brought them back. But as a young person, I wasn't thinking exactly where I was going to put them, what container would hold them and allow them to grow. So I put them in the bathtub. And my mom and dad did not quite share my enthusiasm for the use of that space. So they encouraged me to find a different location, and I took them back to show them the pond. And we made some treks together and filled it, and Max and I would check and watch. So it saved them. We were rescuing the tadpoles, and we got to hear their chorus in the evening, and it was just a fun adventure.
Hey, all's well that ends well, right? Better they were in the pond than the bathtub anyway. Thank you for sharing that story, Sherry. There's nothing like a childhood adventure with a good dog by your side. Our next story is coming to us from Dave Zanotti, CEO and chairman of the board of the American Policy Roundtable. Dave, what was a summer day like when you were a kid?
It's a funny thing, when I was a kid, I always remember how quickly the time of summer would pass. I never wanted it to go fast. I always wanted it to go slow. I knew it was going fast because there were calendars that hung on walls and on the back of refrigerators, and I always sort of thought it was weird that the calendars always came from insurance agencies or banks or funeral homes, always from the places that you have the most grown-up responsibilities around. But anyhow, we just loved the length of each summer day. We would go out and we would play all day long. Now, the neighborhood I grew up in, there was just one single block, and down that block, right in the middle of it, where they divided all the lots, they put a split rail fence. Now, these were homes that were built after World War II. They were small homes, maybe 1,200 square feet. That's not a lot of space for families of 4, 5, 6, 7 people. So we spent a lot of time outside. And we would play out there all day long, from yard to yard. And what we'd do is we'd walk along the fence line in the middle of the block, and we'd jump off and play in one yard and then play in another. And sometimes the people had let their bushes and their shrubs grow up so close to the fence line that you'd walk the fence, but then you'd have to get up on the top rail and sort of scoot your way across to get past that yard. because all the hedges were so close. So we'd play along that fence line all summer long, and we could tell how the time was passing because in the early part of summer, some of the people had berries in their yard. We'd hop off the fence and grab some raspberries or some strawberries. Now, the folks in the neighborhood, they all knew we were there. We weren't causing any harm, and they had plenty to go around. So then later in the summer, I can remember always that the plum trees would come out with fruit. And the fruit would be first really kind of sour, but then if you give it a week or two, those plums got sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. And then you'd get toward the time when it was so doggone hot in August and the weather began to break and you knew summer was coming to a close. But on those trees and those yards across that rail, people had apple trees. And they were early apples. They were bright green and yellow. Now, it didn't mean they were sour apples. They were the early sweet apples. And we would hop off those fences and we'd stuff our pockets as full as we could with those wonderful apples. Those three tastes, those berries in the early summer and the plums in the middle of the summer and the apples at the end, that was our calendar. That's how we knew. And the memory, it's very sweet.
The way you describe it, I feel like I can taste that fruit myself. Dave, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now, listeners, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with more summer stories.
Did you know July 4th, 2026 is America's 250th birthday?
Whoa, and I thought turning 10 was a big deal.
Kids on the Square is celebrating now.
We are digging into the history of the founding of America. Look for episodes that have America's 250th in the title.
Plus, with those episodes, you'll find free activities and resources that apply to the 250th.
And you can leave us a voice message on our website, kidsonthesquare.com. Share with us what you've learned about America and why you love our country.
If you do, we might even share your message on the show. But make sure you ask your parents for permission.
The more we learn about this time in history, the more America's 250th birthday will mean to us.
So join us today at
Kids on the Square.
All right, folks, we are back, and I'm here with Patty Morantis, our Chief Operating Officer. Patty, did you ever go to summer camp?
So when I was a kid, I did summer camp. We were at Camp Carl in Ohio, and I got to bring a friend with me. One of the things my friend and I came up with while we were at summer camp was our own system of finance. We brought M&Ms with us, and we quickly figured out the food wasn't that great and everyone was hungry. So we bartered with the M&Ms that we brought with us. So we created our own system of finance for a couple weeks at summer camp. We didn't have any M&Ms left, but we got lots of other fun stuff. And my friend was much shorter and very petite. And we signed up for the Wilderness Woman Adventure part of the camp. And we got to go hiking in the woods with backpacks, except my friend was too small to carry her backpack. So on one of the trips up a hill, she could not stand up straight, and she fell back on top of me, and I fell back on top of the person behind me, and we had a great time trying to get untangled and back up the hill. And we did find a friendly gentleman to carry that bag for her the rest of the trip.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd rather carry that bag up the hill than have your friend topple backwards on top of him again. And what a surprise that our COO was already operating a business as a child at summer camp. Patty, thank you for sharing your story with us. Up next, we have the American Mission Center's resident librarian, Jana Boriska. Jana, you grew up on a farm, right?
Well, I grew up on a 200-acre dairy farm. And so I was trying to think of one of my favorite stories. I think my favorite time during summer, though, was hay baling season. And that consisted of, so on our 200-acre farm, we strip cropped. So we had alfalfa, hay, corn, and soybeans mostly. So when it was time to cut down the hay for hay baling season, sometimes I would get to ride on the back of the tractor with my dad, which was hooked to a hay baler, and then behind that was a large wagon. So the machinery would lump it and tie it with twine and toss it into the wagon, which was fun to watch, kind of mesmerizing. Then when you filled a wagon, we took it up to the big barn, backed the wagon up the hill into the hay mow, and then it consisted of usually my grandfather, my father, my sister, and I, and our 2 farm hands. And we would unload those hay wagons. We used like a little, we called them elevators. They were electric, and you just threw the hay bales on there, and it took it further up into the hay mound, where it's kind of like an assembly line style. They would unload the hay bales and stack them. It was a huge room just full of hay bales, which was a playground in itself as a kid. But when you were done unloading all the bales of hay from the wagon, there was always loose hay. So we would take, our farm was started in 1864. So all the farm equipment that we used was from then. And we had these wooden hay rakes, which was basically a flat piece of wood on a long stick. And you just used it to push all the excess hay out of the wagon onto the big floor, the open floor. And we would make a huge pile of hay. And then there was a rope in our barn. And so all the kids, after we swept up these huge piles of hay, we would take turns swinging from the rope into this big pile of hay. It makes me itchy as an adult to think about it, but that was some of the best time that we ever had.
Oh, I bet it was so satisfying to just plop right into that big old hay pile. Work hard, play hard, am I right? Thank you for sharing that with us, Jana. All right, folks, our final summer story for the day is coming to us from Alan C. Duncan, executive producer of The Public Square. Now, Alan, you told us a story earlier this summer, but you've got even more shenanigans with your dad to tell us about. Is that right?
There was one summer that my mom had to go on a trip to visit her family. Her family lives in Alabama, or at least most of them did at that time. And so it was Dad was running the show with the 3 boys. I was probably middle school age at the time. So my dad's trying to hang out with us, play with us, do stuff that we're into. This is right around the time the Ninja Turtles are a really big thing. So it's Back to the Future. I love Ninja Turtles, Back to the Future. So I'm riding skateboards a lot. I'm not like good, and I'm not like a skater. I'm more pretend that I'm a anthropomorphic turtle, okay, when I'm doing this. And so I love riding skateboards. So my dad decides he's gonna ride skateboards with me. But basically our street was like 1 mile to 1.5 miles of a gradual slope. From the top to the bottom. Let's just say if you ride a skateboard on it, it's gonna go pretty fast. You're gonna build up quite a bit of speed. So my dad decides he's gonna give it a shot. And so he hops on the skateboard and starts riding down this hill on it. And at first it's like really cool. And I'm running behind him trying to keep up and just watch him do this. You know when you get going too fast on a skateboard and you start to see the shimmy, the little shake? It starts to shake, it's going. So it's shaking under my dad. And there's a point at which when the skateboard begins to shake underneath you, you have to decide, do I push through or do I bail? And so here's the thing, my dad still probably had 1 mile of hill to go. So he chose bail. So he tries to jump off and run as fast as the skateboard's going. He cannot run as fast as the skateboard's going. So now he hits the deck and he starts to tumble. And again, I'm like a middle school age kid, and this is the only adult within the state that can possibly take care of me. And now I see him just wrecking himself. He hits the deck on an asphalt road and he's rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling. I'm like, well, okay. My dad's gonna be unconscious now. I guess I'm the man of the house. So he finally gets up, and I run over to him, hoping he's okay. His shirt was torn to ribbons. I still remember it. It was a turkey trot shirt. It was like a Thanksgiving Day 5K that was in the region, and he tore the thing to shreds. His arms were cut. He was sore for weeks. And he had to call and tell my mother that he tried to ride skateboards and almost concussed himself doing it. So, yes, the sheer panic when you think as a child that you might have to become the man of the house because your dad takes himself out of commission in a skateboarding accident. Yeah, you never forget it.
And this was the only time your dad had a brilliant idea like this?
So then my dad tried to do bike riding with me. Okay, my dad is a little bit like he's a little bit of a wild man. Like he likes to do, like, you wouldn't think this is like he's a Christian pastor and all this kind of stuff, but he's got this like streak. He grew up in a lot of locker rooms, a lot of locker rooms. So he's got this little streak to him. So we were in the parking lot. I think it was behind like a Blockbuster video. So that'll set the stage for you. That'll set the era. Okay, we're behind a video store, and they had like a gate that went up. It was like bordered their whole property, and there was like a concrete slab on an angle that went up to this gate. It was like at a 45-degree angle, this concrete slab up to this gate, and then there was like a telephone pole or a light pole that went into this 45-degree angle concrete slab. And then there was about like a foot of space between the pole and the gate. And my dad thought it'd be a cool idea to see if he could ride up this on a bicycle like a ramp and see if he could sneak between the light pole or the telephone pole and the gate. And so I'm a kid. I think this sounds like a really cool idea. So long story short, my dad tries it. I think he catches the bike handle on the gate, and it sends him falling down the concrete slab, and he dislocates his shoulder. And so anyone who's ever dislocated their shoulder knows it's like a really painful thing to do. So he's hurting bad, and I'm like, can he get home? I don't know. So then he decides to take me to Arby's. We just walk to the local Arby's. It's within walking distance, and he's still clutching his shoulder. And so we're in line at Arby's, and he decides that's the perfect place to pop one's shoulder back into socket. And so he's ordering a roast beef sandwich and popping his shoulder back into place. And he just starts screaming in the middle of the Arby's. He's going, oh! And everybody's looking at him, and I'm pretending like I don't know this guy. And yeah, that's my dad injuring himself and trying to fix it in the local Arby's.
Well, listeners, let this be a reminder to always wear your helmets and elbow pads and knee pads anytime you're skateboarding or riding a bike or really just doing any activity on wheels so that you don't end up like Alan's dad. Alan, thank you for sharing those stories with us. Thanks again to everyone who told their stories on today's episode. And thank you for listening to this episode of Kids on the Square. We hope you enjoyed these summer stories. If you did, please share this episode with a friend and subscribe to our podcast page so you don't miss our next episode. Kids on the Square is generously supported by listeners like you. If you'd like to support this program, you can contact us via our website, kidsonthesquare.com. And if you want a chance for your voice to be heard on the show, we even have a way to record voice messages right there in our contact form. You can tell us what you think about an episode, share things you've learned about these stories from the show, let us know about historical stories you'd like to hear, or even just say hi. You can also visit kidsonthesquare.com to hear more of our podcast episodes and find lots of fun activities and resources to go along with them. And if you're a parent or guardian listening and you're new to the Public Square, we hope you visit our website, thepublicsquare.com, and discover the full host of other radio products we have available. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on
Kids on the Square.